I'm voting for Brexit more in sorrow than in anger. I love Europe, its people, its culture, its variety. But I work in Tech City, and I believe that innovation, technology, science, jobs, the environment, and trade will be better from a Brexit. Here's why. Tech City depends upon countless creative individuals coming together to build and create new stuff, new business models, new artistic creations, new technological inventions. Okay, right, that's better, that's a lot better. Good, right. I'll redo the bit at the end of it. You meet up with someone over a coffee or a drink. You tell him your ideas and he then tells you his. You realize that there's a synergy between your concepts and potential products and services. So you go into business with him, maybe set up a company into which you each put your individual intellectual properties and skills. That's what I've done. Me.
Slightly closer to your mouth.
How's that? That's it? Okay, right, I'll try and keep it at that point. That's what I've done. I have a company, Cashbox TV Limited, which has developed a technology which we call Safecast. Safecast protects the television watershed in catch-up viewing. We were first mentioned in the Sunday Times about 2 years ago. Today we have a granted patent for our in the UK for our solution, and a registered UK trademark too. Later this month, the US patent for Safecast is being granted as well. I paid the patent attorney's fees last Friday. It's been quite a journey. So, having got to the stage over several years, I know a bit about bootstrapping a cutting-edge technology business from zero. And my knowledge and experience means that I can give other entrepreneurs useful advice. I can say this because in a previous life, I was also employed part-time as a reviewer on the European Commission Esprit program, and also participated in a major European Commission harmonization project, which went nowhere. So, first rule. If you want to ruin yourself and your ideas, there's a simple way of doing it. You ask the EU for help and funding, maybe via the Esprit program or one of the EU framework programs. If you do this, your ideas will die. By participating in Esprit and the framework programs, you're going to be a little minnow in a pond filled with sharks. Sir André Gide, the 2010 Nobel Prize winner for physics for his work on the development of graphene, said, "I can offer no nice words for the EU framework program, which can only be praised by Europhobes for discrediting the whole idea of an effectively working Europe. Go for an EU grant or participate in an EU program and you will give the kiss of death to your creativity and your business." The reason for this is that the European Commission is extremely hostile to science and innovation. Its priorities are not in encouraging entrepreneurs, but in protecting old technologies used by big companies or traditional French farmers. Think back to the late Sir Leon Britton's achievement in April 1998, when he was an EU commissioner, in imposing an anti-dumping duty on the imports into the community of personal fax machines, originating from China, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, and Thailand. This was to save the European electronics industries from unfair competition arising from cheap fax machines, which meant that those businesses were suffering. How well did that turn out? I didn't see any mention of it in Sir Leon's obituaries when I looked. Let's look a little nearer time. November 2014, when the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, fired the EU's chief scientific advisor, Professor Anne Glover, the Scottish biologist and academic, because the advice she was giving him was politically inconvenient. Dame Anne Glover, who's a Fellow of the Royal Society, fell foul of the lobbying from non-governmental organisations funded by the EU, including green groups, who disagreed with Professor Glover's support for genetically modified organisms. It was the old French farming lobby in new clothes, the common agricultural policy writ large. We've had the Esprit and the framework programmes for decades. So name me one world-class innovation or company that they've spawned. Just one unicorn, please. There aren't any. Did Baroness Martha Lane Fox see an Esprit grant for developing lastminute.com? No, of course not. She's far too sagacious and thoughtful to have wasted her time in trying to gain help from the EU. Speak to BSE people and they will immediately cite the World Wide Web as an example of a wonderful EU invention. But it wasn't. The World Wide Web was invented by Sir Tim Berners-Lee when he was a contractor, that's not an employee, a contractor in CERN in Geneva, which is in Switzerland outside of the EU. CERN is not the EU or EU funded. It has 21 members, including Israel. Britain was one of its 12 original founders in 1954, 3 years before the EEC was founded in 1957. Britain in Europe likes to take credit for it, but it has nothing to do with it, the EU or its dead hand on technology and science. Now, I love working with people in Tech City and sharing my knowledge and experience. But I have a problem. I'm British, and my first language is English. I'm trained as a barrister in the common law system, the system that's found across the Commonwealth and in the USA. So naturally, I find it easier to work with people who share my language and my legal system, particularly at a technical and administrative level. When Britain joined the EU 40 years ago, there was no internet or World Wide Web to facilitate working at a distance. Today, with Skype, Google Hangouts and a good IP connection, I can communicate and trade with anyone in the world at minimal cost. I can commission piecework from graduates or designers anywhere on the planet using services such as Fiverr. But in any lengthy face-to-face relationship, EU membership requires me to give preference in dealing with people who, frankly, are not the best people for me to deal with. Recently, while working on child protection issues, I had a meeting with a distinguished academic. Knowing about my patents and my work, the academic put me in contact with an Australian startup that is doing great things in developing what's termed privacy-enhanced technology that could safeguard British children. I met with them and I hope to work with them incorporating some of my granted patents into their apps, widening their appeal and marketability. But this Australian startup has to combat the British Tier 2 visa system, which is raising the costs and hindering the ease with which it could get key staff working with me here in London in the satellite operation. After Brexit, the UK would regain control over its borders. It could amend the Tier 2 visa system so that non-EU technologists will be given preference over unqualified Turkish, Bulgarian and Romanian citizens. Hear me out. I said that we can give them preference over people. We can actually start discriminating against unqualified Europeans. No, of course, if they're qualified, they can apply for the Tier 2. Of course not. But we don't. But there's no question. There's no question of us wanting qualified Europeans to come. But what we want to ensure is that we have the pick of the best people in the world, and we're not getting that. And developments like Tech City are being hindered because of our present system, and because of this of trying the costs and pressures that are coming across because of the difficulty in bringing people in. No. We do not want. We want to limit the importation, we want to limit the movement of unqualified. Get this right: unqualified European citizens and Turkish citizens. What about people from elsewhere? We want to. Okay, fine. Right, that's all right. That's all right. So if I can take it from the top on this point. After Brexit, the UK would regain control over its borders. End of. It could amend the Tier 2 visa system so that non-EU technologists could be given preference over unqualified, I'll repeat that again, unqualified Turkish, Bulgarian and Romanian citizens, maybe bringing in a London-only or a Tech City UK-only work visa system. Such a change would enable companies like mine to form real partnerships with Commonwealth and American companies, possibly with shared funding arrangements without EU costs and bureaucracy. It would be a fillip for Tech City UK, which is not just a London phenomenon. There are offshoots appearing all over the UK in places like the Northern Powerhouse and Bristol, because funding and people go together. And that's something that we need. I had the opportunity here of building my businesses with those from Australia, from Canada, from America, which I do not get because of the damned EU. Moving on. So Tech City could give us more and better jobs through Brexit. But then what? When I was a 14-year-old schoolboy, I was given the opportunity to go on an engineering training course to the English Electric Manufacturing and Training Centre in Rugby. At that time, English Electric was a major industrial company making transformers, diesel motors and steam turbines. It merged with GEC, who merged with AEI and with Ultra. Where is it now? For that matter, where's Imperial Chemical Industries, ICI, Rakel, and the major blue chip companies of the age when I grew up? The answer is that they have all disappeared or become minor players as manufacturing industry has got more efficient and capitalist creative destruction has reformed our economy. Computers, when I went to English Electric, then cost millions to make and run. Now they can be made for pennies and are in everything. White goods and brown goods are far less expensive in real terms. Precision engineering is inexpensive. Just look, for example, at the miniature electric motor in a Gillette Fusion Power wet shaver. And in consequence, the profit-generating parts of the economy have moved into services, which is over 80% of the British economy today, such as design and innovation. The cost of manufactured goods and products of all kinds has plunged, and with it their share of the economy. Unlike a lot of the EU, the UK economy has become primarily a services economy, sometimes called an invisibles economy. Services can be very profitable. The British company ARM licenses its chip designs and earns billions, forcing Intel now to give up on making mobile chips. The x86 Wintel machine, as is termed, is now dead. And the next few billion mobile phones and tablets will all contain ARM-designed chips from the company in Cambridge. Apple designs its products and gets them built in China. The product margins on each iPhone is around 70%. By far the highest in the industry. It costs Apple about $200 to manufacture an iPhone 6, which it retails for $649, and only $16 more to manufacture the iPhone 6 Plus, which retails for $100 more. Today, we are rather good at services in the UK, in inventing and creating stuff. London is to advertising what Silicon Valley is to computers, with all the world's top advertising agencies within streets of each other, generating millions for the UK Treasury in profits. Our theatreland, television, music and film industries earn billions from the UK. Our common law legal system is world class and earns billions as invisible exports through the use of our lawyers and courts. The city lives on the back of and creates new wealth from financial services. We have 3 of the world's top 10 universities, and we have an open and inclusive culture which is not racist or homophobic, unlike many states within the EU or states that are about to join the EU. Tech City UK can give us the new creative, knowledge-intense businesses which can replace those lost manufacturing industries like shirt making and steel. Our aim must be to scale up businesses. Sherry Contu's Scale Up report should be essential reading for all UK bureaucrats and policymakers. Tech City is tiny, and companies such as mine are never going to employ a large number of people directly. But my company and other startup companies like mine can feed and nourish the world-class broadcasting establishment and other establishment in other industries, so that those establishment companies can grow and employ more people, give life chances to people who are not entrepreneurs in their DNA. But what about the environment? Why would Brexit be good for the environment? A few days ago, I listened to Mark Linus on the BBC Radio 4 programme, Why I Changed My Mind, broadcast in February 2015, when he was interviewed by Dominic Lawson on how the environmentalist, who was once a prominent figure in direct action to destroy genetically modified crops, why he now advocates for GM technology and what the reaction has been from his former allies. Linus explained how once he finally looked at the science properly, he realized that he'd been completely wrong about GMOs. He regretted his actions and admitted that his actions may have led to malnutrition in Tanzania. It was a brave and powerful program, because it is very hard for anyone to admit that they are wrong and that wrong had consequences. But honest and good people must always be prepared to change their minds and learn. As Maynard Keynes said, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? After listening to the programme's podcast, I did a web search on Mark Linus, and the second Google entry under his name was an excoriating howl from an organisation called GM Watch. GM Watch appears to be fully funded by NGOs, all of which take the EU shilling. Why is it still funded? What is its agenda? Like hundreds of civic-minded people around the world, I'm a contributor to Wikipedia in a small way, and I try always to maintain a neutral point of view when I prepare or edit an article. GM Watch pretends to have a neutral point of view and just points out the dangers. If anything like it came before me on Wikipedia, I would dispatch it for immediate deletion. Further reading and research quickly led me to Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air by Professor Sir David Mackay, a British scientist who set out to cut UK emissions of twaddle by applying the laws of physics and mathematics to the debate on sustainable energy. I was mesmerized by reading this. Here was a British scientist who measured the environmental needs of the world and showed what is possible through global consensus using science, mathematics and engineering. Mackay served as Chief Scientific Advisor to the Department of Energy and Climate Science from 2009 to 2014. My intellectual journey a few days later came full circle when I ran into Mark Linus interviewing Sir David Mackay online. This was Professor Sir David Mackay's last video interview before he died, when Mark awarded him the Breakthrough Paradigm Award and they discussed the future. Mackay died of cancer aged 48, 11 days later, a huge loss to us all. My conclusions from looking around the subject as a scientist, engineer and barrister with a neutral point of view are that the EU is bad for the environment. Leave aside the madness of the common fisheries policy over the years, where it's been dumping fish, over-quality fish, which has devastated sea life. The EU on environmental matters is an embodiment of super evil megacore, which, while a good name for a computer gaming company in America, is not a good thing for living people. After Brexit, Britain would regain its seat in many international summits where it could put forward the good science behind UK developments, such as the Global Calculator, an open source resource created by the UK Department of Energy and Climate Change, rather than the biased and politicised lobbying from the EU's captive cohorts. If we vote for Brexit, we will be able to dump TTIP, the present deal that is being negotiated between the EU and the USA, the transatlantic trade and investment partnership that Merkel has said that should be in place by December. This entrenches the privatization of services and the lowering of environmental and workplace standards, all under rules enforced by democratically unaccountable tribunals. Like almost everyone in this country, I do not want any part of the NHS to be privatised. Yet that appears to be the likely mission creep of the TTIP agreement. Check your facts, chum. That's what you'll find. The average tariff which TTIP addresses are minor. They represent less than 3% on the price of goods and services, and we would continue at this level if a Brexit took place prior to a UK renegotiation with the United States. But there are far bigger tariffs which should concern us, that hinder British businesses getting their goods and services around the world. Some years ago, my wife had a cottage in Hythe in Southampton, near Southampton. On the waterfront was a house that was lived in by Sir Christopher Cockerell, the inventor of the hovercraft. He never made money from his invention owing to patent infringement and copying, mainly by the US military. But his invention lives on in the work of Emma Pullen, a businesswoman operating a small manufacturing business in Kent. It's in a rented factory on a wartime industrial estate that employs about 11 people. It's called the British Hovercraft Company. It makes hovercraft, and 80% of its production is export, but almost none of it goes to the EU countries, partly because their product falls foul of an EU directive, the Recreational Craft Directive, which explicitly excludes air cushion vehicles, ACVs. While not actually banned, it makes selling and using them within the EU somewhat difficult, and as a result, customers opt to spend their money elsewhere. But because the EU doesn't have trade deals with major markets, Emma loses out. Last year, she had an inquiry from a wealthy Brazilian businessman who wished to order 5 small hovercraft from her for a proposed driving activity in Sao Paulo. Purchase price, £50,000. Duty cost in Brazil, £42,000. That's an 80% duty. Needless to say, the deal didn't go ahead, and there have been plenty of similar outcome deals with other non-EU approved nations. Britain is not allowed to make its own trade deals, and this prevents us from selling our products and services, bringing money into the UK, growing businesses and employing more people. Instead, if we vote for Brexit, the UK could negotiate its own trade agreement with the USA and with India and with Africa. It could open Tech City UK to Indian, African and American technologists under an enhanced Tier 2 visa system. On behalf of the Scotch whisky industry, Britain could negotiate its own deal with India, where it could reduce the 150% import duty on Scotch whisky, which hinders our exports in this growing market. Something that has been stalled for years in EU negotiations. We could introduce clean air controls over diesel cars based on how they really pollute, rather than the criminally lax EU measures, and do this in conjunction with US federal environmental standards and class actions, using good science rather than fixes. We have experience of this. Britain brought in the Clean Air Act in 1956 after the London smog of 1952 that killed thousands. We could regulate the power of electric kettles and electric vacuum cleaners based on safety, the benefits for disabled users and how well they work, rather than the say-so of EU lobbyists. We could save lives by not implementing the restrictions on the sale of e-cigarettes to cigarette smokers, thereby following the independent advice of the Royal College of Physicians. The economic case for Brexit is powerful and is grounded in modern science and technology and innovation. Do not be deceived by project fear. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy now to take questions.
I really want to agree with your position on us being able to attract the right sort of talent to the UK. We've lost out on a lot of trades by not having an apprenticeship scheme until recently, so we do need outside help. And you do need to be able to communicate with your staff wherever they're from. Granted, a lot of the EU people have made the effort to learn good English, but we do need to be able to attract the talent that we want from anywhere in the world if we can't find it homegrown.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Let me move on to explain. At the last election, the last time I had the opportunity of voting whether to stay in that time in the common market, I voted to stay in the common market at that time. I believed in the European project. I worked in Europe for the European Parliament. My wife worked for the European Parliament. I worked for the European Commission. I advised them on technology projects. It might be useful if I explain to you my experience and why I've come around to this point of view. I started off as an engineer, as you may have gathered, but I became a copyrights barrister and then a patents barrister. And I was basically headhunted by the European Union to try and work on first of all, technology projects under the Esprit program, and then on the harmonization of copyright in the EU. My first shock arose because I was teaching at the time at the London School of Economics when I was in this project called CITED, Copyright in Transmitted Electronic Documents, where we were trying to work out a way in which you could ensure that copying was not done illegally, that proper copyright owners retain their rights. And there you had a security model to ensure that the books were not copied, the materials were not copied, and the rest of it. It was developed for us by the French military. And I sat down at the review meeting and they outlined it to me. For use in universities, students will be allowed to read books on a need-to-know basis. I threw a wobbly. That is not what learning and education is about. You let children and students go to university to learn about the world, to expand their horizons. You don't control everything that they look on. You give them a reading list, but you ask them to go outside it, come back, debate with you and work with you. And they didn't understand that. But let me tell you why the copyright issue was so crucial and why the whole project failed. Years ago, the British copyright was founded by the Statute of Anne, which originally gave protection for 7 then 14 years. And in the 19th century, it expanded to the life of the author plus 50 years under the Berne Convention, which became the standard. Now, in France, they have a different view of the law. This is one of the reasons why things are there. And they looked upon copyright not being an economic right, but as something that arose out of your soul. And therefore you had a right to paternity, the right to have your name associated with the product, and the right to integrity on these things on that. Now, why is this important? Well, these moral rights were granted in France, and in 1965 the Germans decided that they were going to bring in a new Copyright Act, and there was lobbying to bring in moral rights in Germany. So they didn't. As a political fix, they gave copyright for the life of the author plus 70 years rather than the life of the author plus 50 years. It worked. Fast forward 2 decades and you're into the EU where you are now harmonizing the law of copyright. Instead of harmonizing down, as would be the sensible way, so everyone in the world has life of the copyright plus 50 years, the lobbying was to harmonize up, so that works out of copyright came back into copyright. Works like Mein Kampf, which had dropped out of copyright, suddenly came back in so that the heirs to Hitler could benefit from the rights of the work itself. You had a stultifying effect on a whole range of technologies as a result of that. That is what the EU does. That is a good example of why these projects do not work. because it is big business, entrenched rentier industries that are driving this industry driving the means forward. And that's why we are going to be stronger and better out. Why our technology companies, why our creative companies, why our great new British industries can succeed outside of the EU far better than within the closed group. Thank you for your attention.